Ever wonder why sometimes after messing up you feel a little nudge to fix things, but other times you just want to crawl into a hole and disappear? Hey friends, welcome to Mind Habits. If you're new here, I'm a licensed social worker and an addiction counselor with a curiosity for all things mental health, psychology, addiction, and self-improvement. So in this week's video, we're going to talk about two feelings we all deal with at some point: guilt and shame. My clients in addiction therapy deal with these feelings every day. Guilt and shame might sound the same, but they're actually pretty different. And understanding these differences can help you feel better about yourself, your actions, and the world around you. All right, picture this. You're hanging out with your friend and you accidentally spill soda all over their new, possibly even expensive shoes. Oops, right away, you feel bad. But what kind of bad are you feeling? Is it guilt or shame? To figure that out, let's break these feelings down. And I promise, by the end of this video, you'll be a pro at telling them apart. Ready? Let's go. Let's start with guilt. Guilt is like this little nudge that tells you, hey, you really messed up, but it's fixable. Guilt focuses on your actions. It's like saying, I did something bad, but I'm not a bad person. Think about the soda situation. You spilled it. The action was a mistake, right? But you don't suddenly think you're a terrible person for life just because of that. You feel bad about what you did, not who you are. And that's guilt. Guilt can actually be kind of helpful. I know nobody likes to feel guilty, but in a way, it's your brain's way of reminding you to make things right. Maybe you apologize to your friend or offer to clean their shoes. Regardless, guilt motivates you to take responsibility and do better. Psychologists say guilt can be a sign that you care about others. It's like a little check-in for your moral compass, your internal guide for what's right and wrong. You made a mistake, but now you can fix it and grow from it. Now let's talk about shame. Shame is a little bit heavier, and honestly, it's not as helpful. While guilt is about your actions, shame is about you as a person. It's like saying, I didn't just do something bad, I am bad. Imagine after spilling the soda, instead of thinking, I made a mistake, you start thinking, I'm so clumsy, I'm always messing things up, I'm just the worst. That's shame talking. It's when you turn one mistake into a reflection of your whole self-worth. Unlike guilt, which motivates you to fix things, shame makes you want to hide. You feel embarrassed, worthless, and sometimes you might even want to avoid people because you feel so bad about yourself. Remember the crawl into a hole and disappear feeling? That's shame waving hello. Brené Brown, who's a researcher and a speaker, has done a lot of work on guilt and shame, and she says, guilt is like saying I did something bad, but shame says I am bad. That's a huge difference. And the problem with shame is it makes us feel stuck. It's like being trapped in a box where you feel you'll never be good enough. Not a great feeling to be stuck with. Okay, so now we know the basic difference between guilt and shame. Guilt is about what you did, and shame is about who you are. But let's dig a little deeper and talk about how these feelings can actually affect our lives. When we feel guilty, we're more likely to take positive action. We might apologize, learn from our mistakes, and try to do better next time. It's almost like guilt is a way to remind us, hey, you can fix this. But shame doesn't really push us to do better. Instead, it makes us feel worse. Shame can lead to hiding, avoiding people, or even lying to cover up how we feel. It keeps us stuck in negative thoughts about ourselves, and that's not healthy. Some studies show that too much shame can even affect our mental health. It's linked to anxiety, depression, and feeling lonely. Guilt, on the other hand, when it's not too overwhelming, can actually improve relationships because it encourages you to make amends. So where do these feelings even come from? Why do we feel guilty or ashamed in the first place? Well, guilt and shame often come from things we learn when we're growing up. For example, when we're little, we learn from our parents, teachers, and friends what's right and wrong. If we break a rule, we might feel guilty because we know we've done something that others consider wrong. But shame can come from deeper experiences. Maybe someone told you over and over again that you weren't good enough, or you've been in situations you felt rejected. And over time, those messages can turn into shame, where you start believing those negative things about yourself. Let's say growing up, your mom or dad constantly told you how much of a failure you are and that you're a loser. Being beaten over the head repeatedly with something like this will naturally make you internalize them. And eventually, as time goes on, you'll start to feel ashamed of who you are. Sounds awful, I know, but there is good news. You can unlearn shame. You don't have to carry it forever. We all make mistakes, but those mistakes don't define who you are as a person. Remember, guilt can help you grow, but shame, we can work on letting that go. Now that we've talked about the differences and where these feelings come from, let's get a little bit practical. How can you deal with guilt and shame when they come up? First, if you're feeling guilty, you have to ask yourself, is there something I can do to make things right? And if the answer is yes, go ahead and apologize or try to fix it. Take responsibility, but don't beat yourself up forever. We're all human, and human beings make mistakes. If it's shame you're dealing with, here's a little trick. Talk to someone you trust about how you're feeling. Shame grows in the dark, but when we share our feelings with others, it starts to lose its power. You'll realize you're not alone in feeling this way, and that can be a huge relief. I get it. If you're ashamed about something, you're not going to openly talk about it with anyone, because that's what shame does. In fact, this is the biggest hurdle I come across with all my clients in addiction therapy. They feel ashamed of all the awful things they've said or done to their friends and family, and they don't see a way out. The shame stops them from making amends. Here's how I frame it for my clients. We all have things we regret in life. You're not the person you were back then. People can change, and so can you. Also, try to practice self-compassion. That's just a fancy way of saying be kind to yourself. Treat yourself like you would treat a friend who made a mistake. Would you tell your friend they're a horrible person? Probably not, so don't say it to yourself either. Guilt and shame might seem similar, but they hit in totally different ways. Guilt comes from feeling bad about something you did, and it can actually push you to make things right. It's a reminder that you can do better. Shame, though, is trickier. It makes you feel like you are the problem, like you're not enough, and that can hold you down in ways guilt never will. Once you know the difference, it gets easier to manage how you feel and to stop being so hard on yourself. We all mess up. That's just part of being human. But those mistakes don't define who you are, no matter how big or small. Instead of letting shame take over, remind yourself that you can learn, grow, and move forward. You're worth more than any mistake, and that's something worth holding on to. If you're in the mood for some more healing, watch this next video on escaping the perfection trap. Remember to spread loving kindness to all beings around you and be the change you want to see in the world. Thanks. See you soon.